probably I was never the same person again. I mean, after that experience, I felt
You don't have to look for a style, it just happened.
The outline of this is what you have to try and look at. Now use no water, just use this little bit that's there to try and see the good in everything rather than the bad.
I'm very impatient. I have to get up and do things every so often, and the more exciting or the more dangerous or...
I still remember to this moment that impression I had.
Warm, down to earth, with the refreshing directness of a true Yorkshire lass, then Mifsud can't remember a time when she wasn't drawing.
I think it's just something which is inbred, because I've always done it. I've always drawn or painted or made pictures or doodled, and it's obviously gone back to a very early age, because I had a picture sent into a competition and I won a prize of a 3 and 6 penny postal order, which my mother was very pleased with and she kept, because she said it was worth more than the money, and I think she still got it. So I was not at school, it was before I went to school. I was a very small child then. I can't remember drawing much in my first school. It was a convent, but they taught me to embroider beautifully, and I still can embroider. Recently I've done a tapestry of a painting I've done of Gibraltar, and then I've sewn it, because I like that. I don't like making clothes and curtains and cushions, but I like embroidery and fancy work. So at that school they taught us that very well.
Then went to 4 schools, a convent, 2 boarding schools, and finally a girls' grammar school. That surely must have had something of a disruptive effect on her life.
I went to the convent until I was 8 because it was the best private school in the town at the time. And then I was sent to a boarding school which had a very good reputation, which my mother had wanted to go to. And in reality, it was not a nice school at all. I was very unhappy there. And then they changed and sent me to a different school which had beautiful grounds, beautiful building. I don't think the educational standards were quite as high, but I was happier there. And then I stayed there for 4 or 6 years. And then I left actually because they decided that I should go to the art school because I was painting a lot. And I actually left, and then we were told that I wasn't old enough to leave school. I had to go on going to school. So I went to the grammar school for the last 2 years and did my O-levels. And then I went to the art school when I was 16, when I'd done my O-levels from 16 to 18.
Of all these schools, which exerted the greatest influence? But even more to the point, which was the most sympathetic to Vin's artistic aspirations?
I think the beautiful school, the boarding school with beautiful grounds. At this school we had an excellent biology teacher who grounded us thoroughly in botany and biology. You know, I know a lot about plants. I still actually do love flowers very, very much. I don't paint them too much, but my first love is plants and flowers.
In this, Vin takes very much after her grandparents. To this day, she treasures her grandfather's sketchbook with its 19th century record of all those Yorkshire scenes which were so much a part of her own childhood.
I had a granny who liked flowers. She used to make my grandfather stop the car and we used to all leap out and pick bluebells and things. And then I went to this school. I seem to have had flowers around me all you know, for a great deal of my life. And I've just grown to love them. I don't know if it's because of any influence or whether it would have happened anyway, but I have a great feeling. I do love plants, live plants, very, very much indeed.
At art college, Vin studied drawing, painting, sculpture and lithography, but strangely enough says that picture painting was discouraged.
It seemed to be rather a commercial course. One of the things which I'm appreciating recently is that once a week we were all sent out, no matter what the weather, to paint from life. If it rained, we used to go to derelict buildings or the bus station or the market or where we could find shelter. In nice weather, we were out in the street. Sometimes we were sent to a certain district, sometimes we were told to do a certain thing, and I built a really unattractive sketchbook of places around Barnsley, where I came from, you see. But nevertheless, it did me good. I had to draw to a certain standard, and we had very, very good drawing instruction. But then we were literally told not to paint pictures because you couldn't make money out of pictures. So they were trying to make us into useful, employable people. So we designed book covers, fabrics, any sort of design for wallpaper, anything, you know, all sorts of ways of doing design. That's what we were taught.
A product of that background and training, how commercial is Vin today?
I do it for myself, and I hope that other people will like it. And sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm not.
Despite her training and love of painting, when Vin left art college, she became involved in things that had little to do with art, like modelling clothes and helping her father, who was a vet.
My father sometimes had to do large operations like cesareans, and so I would help him with those, and he would look after the mother and I would look after the babies, you see, and this sort of thing. And setting large bones like thighs, which need a lot of strength to pull them apart. You know, he needed 2 people to help him with things like that. I sometimes went to farms, but I didn't help him much on farms because a farmer usually did that, usually men. I helped him in the surgery more, you see, with the small animals. But you just needed a person to be in the house so that my mother could go out. It was a small business, just my mother and my father. And it was another body to be there to answer the phone and do all sorts of jobs. And I was quite happy really for 3 years. And I only painted then if I went away on holiday. And I can't be idle. I can't even sit and watch television. I always have to have something to do with my hands because I get itchy. This is why I doodle and mess up the phone books and things.
Out of sympathy with the current trends in realism, Vin temporarily stopped painting in the 1950s in the style that was then considered unfashionable. It was not only a time when action painting was all the vogue, it was also a decade that produced Bratby's Still Life with Chip Fryer and Jean at Basin.
It was the kitchen sink era. It was 1957 to 1959. There was a very famous artist who has been here to Gibraltar called John Bratby, who did huge paintings of lavatories and wash basins and kitchens with all the dishes and all the pots out on the table. And sometimes with himself in the foreground, his hand and his leg. And everything was very strong, very masculine, very bold, and detail was not allowed. I was told at art school we were not allowed to do creases in clothes, eyelashes. I was once doing a lovely portrait of a man and I got down to the nose and they told me, leave his mouth out, leave it there, don't touch it anymore. It spoilt my confidence to some extent because at the time I wasn't fashionable. Now I've come back into fashion, but I didn't have the confidence or the knowledge at the time to realise that. And in fact, I get a magazine called The Artist, and there's been an article in The Artist about people who studied at my age, who they are and how many have gone on to do the same sort of work of industrial paintings. And hardly anybody knows about it. It's just something happened. It's a little fashion that was there at that time. We used to paint mine heads because it's a mining community. We used to paint factories, mines, slag heaps, people's allotments and backyards. Nothing, we were not, it was just not done to do a pretty picture. We didn't do flowers at all. The pictures which I do now would really have been laughed out of the place. It wasn't on.
While the 1950s had a stultifying effect on Vin's painting, Gibraltar had the opposite. Vin arrived here in 1972, met her husband, married the following year, and with an eye for the picturesque has been painting Gibraltar scenes and flowers ever since.
One of the things about Gibraltar is its imperfection. It's old buildings, it's higgledy-piggledy-ness, it's peeling paint, the sagging roofs, the Spanish tiles with snapdragons growing between them, the sagging guttering, all these things. If you do a spit new building, nice straight walls, clean paint, nice slate roof or corrugated iron, you have a boring little picture, but curves make nice pictures. So all these old corners, you know, which need a little bit of attention, make very nice, textured, interesting paintings. They're nicer in paintings perhaps than they are in real life, but they just lend themselves to being painted. I've got so many corners in Gibraltar I want to do, I just don't have the time to get on with it and do it. I can still remember walking out of the aeroplane the first time I came. I can remember standing in that doorway at the top of those steps and noticing the clarity, the brightness of the light. Now, when I go to England, as I did last year, I've painted in oil and I've painted in watercolour in England, and my palette's completely different. And when I went to Scotland to paint, for instance, there were some colours I never touched. They were there at the end of the session, and I had to put more of others out. It was completely different.
Few artists in Gibraltar can afford the luxury of a studio. Vin is no exception. However much easels, canvases and picture frames accumulate, what limited space there is needed to accommodate the family. And artists' families have also to be fed.
It would be very nice to have a little room put aside with perfect lighting, a perfect table at a perfect height, little sloping table to work on, for finishing pictures off and for doing pictures which I have to do entirely in the house. I would still go out and do, say, 90% of my pictures outside, 90% of 90% of my pictures outside, and then come and finish them at home. The trouble is that you come in here, you know, if it's a meal time, you have to put everything away, and then you have to take everything away from the meal before you can start again. So it spoils my concentration. It would be very nice to be able to shut myself up somewhere with perfect light and just do these little jobs. I manage, it's okay.
Vin, who's best known for her watercolours, also works in other mediums. But whatever form she chooses, her basic need is to be creative.
Oh, it's an inbuilt urge. I've got to do something. I'd have to either paint or do long and short stitch or tapestry or something. I have to. I can't keep still. If my husband says, let's sit and watch this film, I sometimes make it through one film, but if another good one comes on, I've had it. No matter who it is or what it is, I cannot sit through 2 films in a day. I have to go and do something else.
For someone who describes herself as restless and who avoids flying to England because it means sitting for too long in a plane, how does Vin tolerate the confinement of a small place like Gibraltar?
I love it. It's beautiful. I can go on my bicycle all round the edge of Gibraltar. I can walk to the top of the rock in less than an hour. I can walk to the lighthouse in less than an hour. And I have never felt claustrophobic or restricted in Gibraltar in the least. I feel very much at home here.
The manner in which the artist can engender awareness or prod society's conscience varies greatly, of course, with each individual painter. How does Vin see the role of the artist in society today?
Artists do all sorts of things. Sometimes they're making beautiful objects for houses or buildings or whatever. In my case, I think sometimes I'm recording things as they are, and therefore later on as they have been, because already a lot of the things I've painted have changed or gone. I've even found paintings in second-hand antique shops and things like that of mine. So, you know, it's, oh yes, they're coming up now, second-hand. And it's startling sometimes to see how things have changed. And occasionally I'm a little bit afraid to paint something, because occasionally one thing after another I paint and then it's knocked down or chopped down or whatever. And I sometimes think I'm jinxed. And I think, well, I'll put that off a little bit longer just in case, you know.
So what is perhaps even more pertinent, does society have a responsibility to the artist?
I think an artist is like anybody else. I think you have to look after yourself, but I think that if an artist says, don't do something horrendous to an important part of the town, for instance, because something is very beautiful, and an artist, through an artist's eye, can see that you're going to destroy something wonderful and spoil something, then perhaps that artist should be listened to and the thing should be looked at again. I think perhaps it wouldn't be... All the governments we've had in Gibraltar since I lived here, they have their efficiency, they can deal with the money and all this sort of thing, but I don't think there's been anybody with an eye for beauty. I've lived here now for nearly 20 years. And I have never felt that there's anybody in the government with an eye for beauty. And I wouldn't mind an artist, not necessarily myself, but somebody with an eye for beauty who can see things as I see them, or similarly, sometimes being consulted and think, well, what do you think about this? Would this work? Would it spoil so-and-so? There's certain things going on at the moment which horrify me.
It's said that every country has the government it deserves, and likewise a community deserves the environment it gets. How would Vin, as an artist, like to see Gibraltar's environment improved?
Well, I'd like it to be cleaned up. And that's not the fault of the government at the moment, nor the people who do the cleaning. That is the fault of certain individuals. There are still people who insist on throwing the rubbish over the wall into the engineer house car park garden. They think it's their own resident permanent rubbish tip. And why they want a rubbish tip, a permanent rubbish tip in the town, I don't know. I can't understand that at all. I'm very pleased about the reclaimed land and that they're putting lots of big buildings down on the reclaimed land. But quite frankly, I'm appalled at the new harbours. I'm horrified at the new harbours. I don't know why a song and dance wasn't made about the 3 breaches in the city wall. I would have liked the Heritage Trust or the Conservation Society or whoever to have behaved like Action for Housing and to have been a stirring up action group and to come out and made a noise, whether they won or not. I mean, if you don't say anything or it's very quiet and gentle, people are inclined just to shrug and say, oh, well, we'll get away, it's okay. But if you get a few raucous people saying, oh, you don't make a big fuss, as Action for Housing do, that's the sort of example I would like to have seen used in the 3 breaches of the city wall. For one thing, they would probably still have breached it somewhere, but they might have done 2 breaches or 1, which would have been better. And I would like to have seen some plans, because I am absolutely horrified at these plastic buildings appearing right against the city wall. I wouldn't have minded if they were in the dockyard. I thought they were going to be in the dockyard where the old buildings in the dockyard are, as it were, with a big space between the wall and the buildings. But this is right against the wall. You can't miss it.
And that must surely be the anguish of the artist, the heartfelt cry of protest against the desecration of all that is historic, beautiful, or unique in any community. But apart from this emotion, what others does painting extract? What motivates Vin today?
Well, every painting is a challenge. I'm never quite sure if it's going to work out. I definitely know that subconsciously, deep in my brain, each painting is planned, and unconsciously I can see the finished product. I know what I'm going to do before I start.
Whilst accepting that no artist, not even the most famous, can please everybody, how hard does Vin herself try to? Is this a factor she keeps constantly in mind when she's painting, this reaction of other people to her work?
When I was younger it mattered. Now it doesn't matter to me anymore. Now I do what I want. And I hope that other people will like what I do. But when I was at art school I had very little confidence. There are all sorts of things I wouldn't have dared to try. But now, if anything comes into my head, if I want to do anything, at least I'll have a go. And if I don't like it, it'll be ripped up, destroyed, disappear. Nobody need ever see it. For my own satisfaction, I shall know whether I can do it or not. This is confidence that comes with age.
But does Vin ever resort to her art as a form of therapy?
Not really, because if I'm not quite happy and tranquila, I don't work well. When we've had problems, family health or any problems like that, on the whole I don't paint well. I actually paint dark pictures. And many years ago, about 10 years ago, when we had quite a lot of family problems, that year people told me that all my paintings were coming out dark, which is unusual because normally they're quite light and cheerful. So it obviously affects me, but I don't really want to paint if I have problems.
From time to time, artists must surely be tempted to speculate on what would happen if they were free of family commitments and responsibilities. I
would spend more time painting, but I'd probably only do 2 or 3 paintings a week, because I've only got so much in me to... If I paint too much, I have to have a rest. I'm finished. There's nothing there to produce a picture. Whatever it is that motivates me, I can wear it out, and then I like to spend a couple of days in the house doing mundane jobs like ironing or just housework. I'm actually pleased to do that if I do lots and lots of painting.
So what does Vin have in mind when she sets up that easel and settles down to yet another painting?
Well, I do my best with my paintings, and I don't satisfy everybody. I don't always satisfy myself. I look at certain paintings and I have certain criticisms in my own mind. Other people don't always agree, because sometimes I criticise paintings that everybody else likes and vice versa. I would just generally like to be more satisfied more often. I can only say that I do 1 painting a year on average, which I'm 100% happy with.